Good afternoon and welcome to a short little video tutorial for how to use Autodesk Meshmixer. I know as a few more people have gotten into 3D printing with Star Trek models, I've had a few people asking me, well, how do you cut up your model? How do you size your model? That kind of thing with using Meshmixer, and it's a very simple program to use. There's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot that I don't know about, but I'm just going to give you the basics for how you would start with a model that you want to build at, say, 15 inches long, and you can't build that on the printer that you have, so you have to cut it up. You have to turn it into an actual model that you reassemble later on. And there's simple slices that you can do, and that's all fine and dandy. But a lot of times you want to turn your model into something that actually feels like a model that's pinned and tabbed and you put together properly. So that's basically what I'm going to show you how to do here. To start with, I've already pulled a model that I had done earlier, and I'm just going to go ahead and redo with you guys here, and we'll start from the beginning here. And so when you open up Meshmixer, you're going to see a lot of tools along the side here, but you start with your tools that are in place right here in front of the screen. So you're not going to go to open because that's going to open a Meshmixer file. You're going to go to import. So now that you're in import, like I said, I've already been in here, so I'm doing another model right now. But we're going to pick an original series model. We're going to pick this wonderful pilot model right here, pilot enterprise model. And I've already fixed the mesh and made it printable, which is why it says fixed right here, but that'll be another video. But for the meantime, we'll just select that and open that up. And there's your model. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is learn how to move around in the field, because that's all very simple stuff, but you need to know right away. So if you have your typical 2-button plus a track wheel plus a wheel mouse, zooming in and out is moving the wheel back and forth, of course. If you want to pan around, you use the right hand button. You hold down the right hand mouse button like that. Right and left hand mouse button, as you can see here, I'm clicking away, it does nothing. You can pan like that. Now if you want to move it up and down like that, you go back to that wheel, and rather than moving the wheel back and forth, you just click the wheel down, and you can move up, down, around like that. And you're going to need that information. You're going to need to be able to do that down the line. So let's go ahead and get started with this model here. You'll notice that it's half above and half below the plane of reference here. And that's perfectly normal that most people keep it like that, but I don't like to keep it like that. I like the whole thing being above the plane of reference. That's just me. Now you can do that. There's a couple different ways to do. The first and most obvious way is to come over to, wait a minute, where am I at? Yeah, edit, transform. And then you can grab here and move it up or down, inside, front, back like that. Now that's a simple way of doing it, but there's an easier way. When you've got it sitting here like this, you just use hotkeys and you just hit T for transform. And you can put it up above the field like that, and then click accept. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to scale this. Before we've changed anything on the model, we want to scale the whole thing to whatever scale we like. Okay, so I am a 1 to 1400 scale freak, which most people already know. So I want to make sure that my model is going to be 1 to 1400 scale. And I've already done the math on here. I don't know if you can see the calculator, but if you can, the Enterprise is 289 meters long. Times 1000 is going to give you your millimeters divided by 1400, and so I need my model to be 206.428 millimeters. No problem. We go back to T again. Right here, X, Y, and Z. Pick the longest one, the Z, which in this case is the Z. 206.428 millimeters. And then once I click out of that into another field, because you can see I've got my uniform scaling here, everything matches up, and now I have my smaller model. So let's go ahead and accept that right now. And let's play with that transform tool for a few more minutes here, just so that you can see some other things that you can do with it. If I use my hotkey T to go to transform, you saw a couple other features besides the X, Y, and Z axis that you can move it on here. You see these little squares. Well, if you click on that and pull it, you see what it's doing to the whole model, which is just beautiful. And you can turn your model into some crazy freak of nature, as you can see right here. He's definitely gone through some sort of warp bubble there. And you can also rotate your model. If you grab these arcs, and you can see along here, you can rotate your model in any direction that you want. And you're going to use those features later on, but not for this particular tutorial. Obviously, we're going to cancel all of that, and we're just going to make sure that we kept ours at 206.41 millimeters. Okay, so that's all fine. Alright, so now you have an idea of how to move around in the space, and I'm going to show you how to cut the model up. Now, for anybody who has 1400 scale models, we all know and love the StarCraft's original series Enterprise and how that's basically cut up. So since we don't have a pilot episode Enterprise from StarCraft's, we're just going to go ahead and cut this one up as though it was a StarCraft's model. And which means I'm going to cut it up with the saucer and the interconnecting dorsal as one piece, the secondary hull on its own piece. Obviously, the deflector is going to be by itself, and then each nacelle and pylon is going to be its own individual piece. So the very first thing we're going to do before we touch anything else is we're going to come over here to Edit. And we're going to make sure that this is one single model and not a few small pieces that are stuck together. So we're going to come to Edit, and we're going to click Separate Shells. Okay, and we'll see that there's actually two shells. There's two pieces of this model that are currently in here right now. And we're going to just make them both disappear. Because a lot of times one shell will be just this tiny little thing that you can't even realize. You see how I am using the eye icon. Open the eye and the image appears, close the eye and the image disappears. And this, whatever this shell is right here, it's so small, it's probably just a single pixel or two, that it's not visible at all. So we don't need to keep that particular shell. So we're going to make sure that's highlighted. And we're going to come down here to the trash can and hit delete. And now we're going to open up the one that's the shell that's active. And let's go ahead and rename that right now because it's kind of got a big name. All you have to do is double click. And we'll just do TOS Pilot E. And that's all you have to do there. And you can click on the model to save that name. And another thing that you have to be aware of with Meshmixer is it's a very powerful program and it does a lot of great things. It's also very buggy. So you need to get into the habit of performing an operation or three, coming up here, and saving the work that you've done. Now, since we're going to save this the first time, I'm going to hit Save As. And let's come back over to the TOS era, and we're going to create a whole new one here. We'll call this one Pilot Tutorial. Now see, this is going to save it as a Meshmixer mix format. Okay, now we've got this saved with the work we've done. We've moved it up, we've rescaled it, we have already gone through to separate shells to make sure that there's no extra little bits, and we are ready to start cutting up our model. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to use simple plane cuts for all of these things. And we can find these over in the Edit section, and you'll see plane cut right here. And you'll see lots of other tools that you can use. there's a lot of these that I don't use. There's a few of these that I do, transform, duplicate, mirror, when I'm creating something new. But when I'm cutting up a model, a lot of times I just need to stick with the plane cut. Now, when you click on plane cut, you're going to see a couple things that just happened here. First of all, here's the little toolbar for plane cut. You've got a couple different types of cuts. You can slice and discard half. You can slice and keep both, and then you can slice groups, which I've never touched slice groups. Obviously, we're going to be slicing and keeping both because we don't want to throw away whatever we're using right now. And I do like to keep this at remeshed fill instead of fixed or minimal. Fixed will take too long. It's very buggy. Minimal fill, there's a lot of things it won't fill in properly if you use minimal fill. So I like you keeping it at remeshed fill. So I'm not going to hit accept right now because obviously if I was to accept that, it would slice the model right there in the middle of the neck and in the middle of these pylons. And I can see what you're saying. You're saying, but wait, it's a plane, which means it's infinite, and whatever it slices here, it's going to slice the same level here. And you're absolutely right. But we don't have to worry about that because we can also recombine all the things that we're going to do. So let's start with this plane feature here. And again, just like with the model, I can move the plane up and down. I can angle the plane if I want. I'm going to set the center of the plane pretty much in the center of the pylon here of the neck. And I'm going to roll down until I touch the secondary hull. Now, you can see from here, this is a nice solid green, nice solid greens here. That means that when it cuts, it's going to create a solid cut that's not hollow. I'll see if I can find one that is hollow, and you'll see the difference between the two, and you'll know what to avoid because you want to try and avoid those ones that show up as hollow. But for now, we're going to do this, and since it's easier to see that from above rather than below, because I want to see exactly when it touches the secondary hull, I'm going to use this arrow, this big arrow that you see right here, and just click on it once. And you see now I can see everything underneath the plane of slicing, but not above. So I'm going to continue, and again, use the center key here, move this over, and then use the left-hand key so that I can pan it around, scroll in, and I'm going to come down here like so. Now see, I've hit the top of the secondary hull here, but there's plenty of room there to work from. So I'm going to come over here to the middle. You see how there's still more of the neck down here because of course it's angled. So I'm going to come like this, and I'm going to angle my plane of cut so that it matches roughly the angle of the root. And then I'm going to continue going down. And you're not going to be able to get this 100% perfect, but you can get it pretty close. It's actually pretty cool how close you can get to it just by using the Mark 1 eyeball. And I'm going to come down a little bit more. Now see, you can see on the green, now I'm starting to catch this side, but I'm not catching that side. So that means I'm probably about as close as I'm going to get. So I'm going to grab this again, come up just a tiny bit. There. Yeah. And as I pan around, you can see that that looks pretty good. Now, since I didn't move any of the other axes, this is going to be exactly parallel. So we should be in good shape here. And you'll also notice that I've also cut most of the pylons off here and here, but there's still a pretty big, hefty chunk of pylon on those sides. We're going to fix that. Don't you worry about it right now. Right now, we're just focusing on cutting the saucer and the neck away from the secondary hull. You come back over to plane cut here. You make sure that you keep it at slice. You hit accept. And then from here, you need to select separate shells. Until you do that, you haven't actually officially cut the model apart. Now that I've hit separate shells, you see I've created a whole bunch of new shells. You can see them along here. And what it's done is it's separated the saucer and neck from the secondary, and it's also separated each one of these pylons. So since we've done that, let's go ahead and take a second to name them first real quick. Instead of shell 1, shell 2, shell 3, we're just going to go ahead and double click and rename that saucer. This one we're going to rename secondary. We'll select that one and we'll rename it port nacelle. And last but not least, we'll take the right hand one and rename that starboard nacelle. All right. And like I had mentioned before, now that we've finished that operation, just to be on the safe side, go ahead and now you can just hit save. You don't have to hit save as. We're just going to save as we go. Okay, so now we've got the saucer and the neck separated from everything else, and I can use my little eyeball icon here and I can close that out. You'll see that if it's if I've got the item selected like this, but I've closed the eyeball, then that piece that just got turned off shows up as transparent red. But the minute I select another part of the model, boom, it disappears. Okay, so we've got that removed. Let's go ahead and turn off these for the moment as well. And let's work on finishing up this lovely secondary hull here. Let's separate this deflector dish from the rest of this part here. And you know, the deflector goes pretty far down inside here, so we're going to have to cut that deep inside and then recombine all of these pieces here. And the other thing we're going to have to do is we have to remove these little stumps of the pylons here and here. So let's actually do that first. So we have our secondary hull selected. We're going to come back over here to edit. We're going to go to plane cut. And the plane cut tool is always going to put the center of the tool in the middle of whatever item you've selected. So you can see here that it's in the center, dead center of the secondary hull, which is kind of cool. That helps a lot if you're doing other items that you want to slice right in half. It automatically does that for you, which is very, very cool. But we're not going to do that at this point. First thing we're going to do before we start touching this is we make sure that we have this set. Instead of discard half, we want to keep it on slice, keep both, and remeshed fill. And now we're going to go ahead and move the tool a little closer to the center of the parts that we want to remove. So we're going to pop it up here. And again, I want to be able to see from the top down, so I'm going to click this arrow. There we go, like that. Okay. Actually, I think it maybe looks better that way for now. Let's start with the starboard side one. We'll come over here, and you see how I'm kind of putting it in the center of the pylon itself. There we go. Now, obviously, we need to angle this appropriately compared to the model. We're getting close. You can see that we're getting pretty close here. And let's come down. Now you see this big green swath as well, besides the part that we're cutting. When we do this plane cut, it is going to remove this big chunk right here, but since we're keeping both, we'll be able to recombine that without any issues. Now again, because of the angles of the ship, you see how we're much closer, the slice is much closer to the secondary hull here at the front than it is the back. So we can fix that just by angling it along like that. And you see that it also removed all that big green swath right there. And we can continue scooching it down. We're going to try and get it as close to the hull as possible, just like we had done with the primary hull. That's pretty close. That's really close. Okay. I think we're good there. I'm just going to spin it around a little bit to make sure that it looks all right. Okay. Yeah, that definitely looks good. So we make sure that we've sliced get both. We hit accept. And once again, we hit separate shells. Now that's going to create that as a separate piece. And see how it's labeled secondary shell 2. Well, let's go ahead while we're doing that, and let's open up the starboard nacelle, and we're going to combine these two. Select the main piece that you want, and then select the smaller piece by holding down the shift key. Let me show you that again. You select the main piece that you want, hold down your shift key, select the other piece that you want to combine, and you have a few different options to do. In this case, it's always easier. You can do Boolean union. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of good things about Boolean union, but in this particular case, when you're recombining these items, it's just easier for the processor, easier in terms of speed to hit combine. And you'll see down here that because you selected the larger part with that name, it combined it in with that name. So now the starboard nacelle is all one full piece, and you can see the color difference from where we combine these two. You'll see that in the future parts as well. We can close that out. Now we're going to select the secondary hull again, and let's go ahead and do another plane cut. Oop, there's a good accident that can happen. Control C. Sometimes you think that you're grabbing your tool, but you actually aren't, and you're just making a line like this. Now, what you're doing when you do that is you're creating an angle that the plane will cut along. You see how that worked? But that's not what you really wanted to do. So Control Z will fix that error before you don't even have to hit cancel, anything like that. Control Z will send you back to where you were. So we're going to try that again. We're going to take this, bring it over here, come around to this side, bring it up, bring it over, and we're gonna, are we in the middle? We're mostly in the middle. Okay. I've just found that it's easier to work from bringing the tool to the middle of the part that you want to work on. Okay. And just like with the starboard side nacelle, you can see that even though we haven't moved any of these angles, you can see how because of the shape of the hull, the cut is much closer to the front of the pylon than the back. So again, we're going to take this and just rotate it like so. Now there's a couple different ways that you can rotate this, and I'll show you both right here. If you want to do non-incremental bits, you see how it's giving you like 11.58, 9.45, 2.47, non-incremental bits. So you're just eyeballing. You can keep it inside of that dial face that you see. This dial face. Now if you come over to the dial face, 5, 10, 15, 20. You see how it snaps to those perfectly. As long as you're touching the dial face, it will snap to those degrees perfectly. But if you're outside of the dial face, it will do non-incremental bits that will allow you to just eyeball it. And for models like this, honestly, most of the time I'm just eyeballing them. Okay, let's get down closer, closer, not that close. And you can see why I said not that close. I'm in the green, and then all of a sudden, boom, now I'm slicing a piece off all along here, which I don't want to do. So we'll come back up. And I feel like that's not really as accurate as the starboard side. So let's try rotating this just a little bit more, like so. And just a tiny, tiny bit like that. Okay, let's see if that does any good. Okay, that did a good job. We're much closer to the secondary hull now. So now that I'm in that spot, I'm going to make sure this is switched from cut to slice, accept, and separate shells. And now these two are separate. And just like I did on the starboard nacelle, I'm going to go ahead and open up the port nacelle. And I'm going to combine this by right-clicking on it. I'm sorry, left-clicking on it. And then hold down my Shift key, left-click on this piece, and hit combine. Just like that. Secondary hull is still secondary, and when you're slicing, it likes to put in the shell names as well, which I occasionally just come back and clean up. That way my object browser looks nicer. Okay, so now we've got these separated away. We're still going to work on that secondary hull. Now we're going to work on getting that lovely deflector dish away. So we'll come back over to Edit, Plane Cut. Here's where those 5-degree increments really come in handy. I'm going to grab my arc here, and I'm going to come boom, 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 90 degrees, just like that. And we're still set in the center, which is what I was telling you about earlier, is nice to do. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to keep this up until I can see those rings separate. There we go. Okay, our rings are starting to separate here. That's where we really want, right there. You see how all the rings have separated. Oop, too far. I want to do it right at where they begin. Right there. There we go. Okay. Now if I come over to this side and click this blue arrow here to flip the view, that's nice. Okay. So this shows you all the different rings that it's going to cut away, including the center piece, which is going to be our stub for our deflector dish right there. So we'll make sure that this is slice, keep both, accept, separate shells. Now it's going to create a whole bunch of things here. You see along here it created a whole bunch of extra shells. 5 new objects created by the separate shells tool. Cool. Okay. So let's select the deflector first of all. And let's go ahead and name it as such. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and close the eyeball on that. And we want to recombine all of these pieces here. So we're going to select the main one, the secondary hull, and now we're going to hold down our Shift key and start left-clicking, selecting all of our rings again, and hit combine. Okay, now we're back. As you can see right here, the secondary hull has all of its rings. I'll take that silly shell off of there. And if I close the eyeball on that and open the eyeball on the deflector, you can see how the deflector is one whole solid piece, including the stub to the back, and we're going to start pinning this model now. We've created all of these parts, and the next video I think we're going to go ahead and pin. But before we close this video out, we're going to come back up here to File and hit Save. And there you go. There is the Pilot Era Enterprise, original series Enterprise, Pike's ship before they did that redesign, which I actually do love the redesign for Pike's ship. I just wish that they had straight pylons. That's really my only gripe about it. But beggars can't be choosers, and I was not consulted on that, so I don't think I can complain too much. Anyway, I will see you in the next video, and I hope you enjoyed this one.